I don't want to drive oil prices up to $100 a barrel or $150 a barrel because I'm driving them down. If you look at oil prices, they've come down very substantially over the last couple of months. That's because of me.
Ever feel like the world economy is walking a tightrope? Well, that tightrope is looking pretty worn out right now. The tensions simmering in the Middle East, especially between Israel and Iran, aren't just local headlines. They're more like tremors threatening to set off a global economic earthquake. Seriously, the fuse has been lit, and it leads straight to a tiny choke point that controls a massive slice of the world's oil.
Iranian oil refineries, take a look at that. So he reports this. He writes, last week, Israel carried out a preemptive attack on Iranian nuclear facilities. He says at that time, no oil facilities were struck, and the oil market was concerned that Iran will retaliate by attacking either Israeli or American targets, leading to a major military escalation and a potential oil supply disruption.
Picture this. You wake up one morning and the price of oil hasn't just nudged up, it's exploded. We're talking a surge past $100 a barrel, maybe even hitting $120 or $130 if things get really bad. This isn't some far-off fantasy, it's a very real danger, all thanks to the escalating fight between Israel and Iran. We've already seen direct military clashes, including strikes on important sites, send shivers through the markets. Oil prices have jumped big time in a single day because of it. So what happens if this simmering conflict truly boils over and hits the main artery of global energy? Section 1, the problem. Setup, the tinderbox and the choke point. The Middle East is a geopolitical powder keg and sparks are flying. Right at the heart of this brewing storm is the Strait of Hormuz. It's a narrow strip of water separating Iran from Oman and the UAE, and honestly, it's probably the world's most critical highway for oil. Get this, something like a fifth to a third of all global oil shipments, plus a huge amount of liquefied natural gas, LNG, squeezes through this strait every single day. That's about 20 million barrels daily, and roughly 70% of that is heading to Asia, literally fueling the factories and businesses that run the global economy. Iran, just because of where it sits on the map, basically controls the northern side of this strait. Now, oil comes from all over. The US, Saudi Arabia, Russia are big players. But because so much oil has to pass through Hormuz, Iran has a ton of leverage, way more than you'd think just by looking at its own production numbers, which are around 3 to 4 million barrels a day.
Iran, the organization of the petroleum exporting countries' third largest producer, pumps about 3.3 million barrels per day. A drop in output could squeeze global supplies, though other OPEC nations may step in.
Any disruption here isn't just a small hiccup, it's a direct punch to the global energy supply. And the recent flare-ups like Israeli strikes and Iranian responses in June 2025 have made this threat feel terrifyingly real, not just theoretical. Section 2, agitate, the oil bomb mechanism, how Iran could light the fuse. So how could Iran actually set off this oil bomb? The scenario that keeps everyone up at night is the closure, or even a major disruption of the Strait of Hormuz. They could try it a few ways: naval blockades, dropping sea mines, or even directly attacking oil tankers. Now, most experts think a full, long-term shutdown is an extreme step Iran would think twice about. It would risk pulling in major world powers and would tick off its own big customers like China. But even a credible threat or a partial disruption could send prices completely wild. We've already seen it happen. Oil prices have shot up by as much as 13% in a single day because of the conflict, the biggest jump since the early days of the Russia-Ukraine war. Brent crude, that's a key oil benchmark, has been dancing around and is predicted to break that $100 mark if we see direct attacks on oil facilities or ships. Even if they don't fully close it, Iran could just start harassing ships. That would jack up insurance costs and shipping rates, basically slowing down oil transit without a full blockade. And what if Israel attacks Iran's oil export facilities, or Iran hits back at energy sites in the region? That could also take a serious amount of oil off the market. Goldman Sachs figured that if Iran's oil export capabilities get damaged, its supply could drop by 1.75 million barrels a day for 6 months. Even if other OPEC plus countries try to fill the gap, that could easily push Brent oil well over $90 a barrel. Right now, the market is mostly reacting to the risk of something happening, Not huge supply cuts yet, but with everyone on a hair trigger, any direct hit on energy flows could unleash absolute chaos. Section 3, agitate, first ripple, skyrocketing energy costs at your doorstep. When crude oil blows past $100 a barrel, the first place you'll feel it is in your own wallet. And so will every single industry that uses energy. Gas prices at the pump, they'd shoot up, making your daily drive, the school run, or any trip way more expensive. Heating and cooling your home would suddenly take a much bigger chunk of your budget. For businesses, especially in trucking, shipping, and manufacturing, these higher energy costs aren't something they can just swallow. Airlines would see their fuel bills soar, and you can bet those costs would end up in higher ticket prices. Trucking companies, which are the lifeblood of our supply chains, would have to charge more to deliver pretty much everything. That means groceries, electronics, you name it, it'll all start costing more on the shelves. This isn't just annoying, it's a direct hit to your spending money and a real drag on the economy as people cut back to afford the basics. Section 4, agitate, second ripple, inflation ignited and market mayhem. Soaring energy costs are like pouring gasoline on the fire of wider inflation. When it costs more for businesses to make things and move them around, those price hikes inevitably get passed on to us, the consumers. That means the price of food, clothes, gadgets, and services all start climbing, leading to a steady rise in the cost of living. Central banks, who are already trying to carefully manage inflation after the pandemic, would be stuck in a terrible spot. Do they raise interest rates even more to fight this new wave of energy-fueled inflation, risking a deeper recession? Or do they just let inflation run wild and watch everyone's buying power disappear? Financial markets absolutely hate uncertainty and instability, and an oil shock this big would unleash pure chaos. Stock markets, already jumpy from all the geopolitical drama, would likely take a nosedive as investors scramble for safety. We've already seen markets get nervous with these escalations, with big indexes like the Dow and S&P 500 taking noticeable hits. Wild swings would become the new normal. The risk of stagflation, that awful combination of a stalled economy and high inflation, becomes very, very real. That could even shake the banking sector if ongoing inflation forces central banks to make drastic moves. Section 5, agitate, third ripple, global economic slowdown, creeping towards meltdown. Put it all together, sky-high energy prices, out-of-control inflation, and panicked financial markets. What you get is a major global economic slowdown, one that could easily tip over into a full-blown meltdown. Businesses, struggling with higher costs and fewer customers, would likely cut back on new projects, freeze hiring, and in many cases, start laying people off. Unemployment would rise, making people even less confident and less likely to spend. Global trade, which is already dealing with its own set of problems, would suffer even more as import costs go up and demand in big economies dries up. Supply chains, still trying to get back on their feet after previous disruptions, would face a whole new set of headaches. The cost of shipping goods around the world would climb, not just because of fuel, but also because of higher insurance and security costs in dangerous regions. Developing countries, often the ones hit hardest by outside shocks and usually big energy importers, could face terrible debt problems and severe economic pain. That dream of a soft landing for the global economy? It could quickly turn into the nightmare of a synchronized global recession, or even worse if the oil shock is bad enough and lasts long enough. The International Monetary Fund has already warned about growing risks to the economy from conflicts and shaky trade policies. A major oil crisis would be like throwing a lit match on that. Section 6, agitate, fourth ripple, your finances under siege, your future at risk. This isn't just about fancy economic terms, this is about your personal financial security. When a global economic crisis hits, especially one sparked by an oil price bomb, your savings, your investments, and your everyday cost of living are directly attacked. If you have money in the stock market, its value could tank as markets freak out. Retirement accounts could shrink significantly. The purchasing power of your savings would evaporate as inflation kicks in, meaning that money you've carefully saved buys less and less. The cost of essentials, food, utilities, getting around would gobble up a bigger slice of your income, leaving less for anything else. whether that's paying off debt or planning for the future. Job security would become a huge worry as businesses shrink. For those with mortgages or other loans, rising interest rates, a likely move to fight inflation, could mean much higher monthly payments, squeezing household budgets even tighter. This isn't just about getting through a rough patch. A severe oil shock can have long-lasting damage on your ability to build wealth, save for retirement, and just live a decent life. That feeling of financial stability, which is already shaky for a lot of people, could be completely shattered. Section 7. Solve Jerk Insight. Are global markets prepared? The vulnerability exposed. So how ready are global markets for an oil shock like this? The picture is, well, not great. We look pretty vulnerable. Yes, countries like the United States and other members of the International Energy Agency, IEA, have strategic petroleum reserves, SPRs. These are emergency stockpiles of oil that can be released to temporarily soften the blow of a supply cut. The IEA says it's well stocked and ready to release these reserves if needed, holding around 1.2 billion barrels. But here's the catch. These reserves aren't endless. The world uses about 100 million barrels of oil every day. So even a big release can only plug the gap for a short time, and there are risks if we drain these emergency supplies too fast. Some analysts think that, looking beyond the immediate conflict, the long-term outlook for oil might be a bit weak because countries outside of OPEC+, like the US, Brazil, and Guyana, are pumping out more oil. But that doesn't cancel out the very real risk of a sudden price explosion if there's a big, unexpected disruption in the Middle East. OPEC+, that's the group of major oil-producing countries, does have some spare production capacity. But how willing and able would they be to quickly ramp up output to cover a huge shortfall, especially one caused by a conflict involving one of their own members, like Iran? That's a tricky question, full of complex politics. Plus, while some Gulf nations like Saudi Arabia and the UAE have pipelines that can go around the Strait of Hormuz, they don't have nearly enough capacity, only about 4 to 6.5 million barrels per day, to replace the roughly 20 million barrels that go through the strait. Countries like Kuwait, Qatar, and Bahrain have no other routes out. The hard truth is, if millions of barrels per day suddenly disappeared because of a Hormuz disruption, our current ways of coping would be overwhelmed fast. Section 8. Solve Insight, the bigger picture, cascading effects, and the rush to safety. The bigger picture here is one of everything being deeply connected and incredibly fragile. An oil price shock starting in the Strait of Hormuz wouldn't just be an energy crisis. It would spiral into a global crisis hitting every part of the economy in every corner of the world. It really shows how instability in one region can hold the entire global economy hostage. When things get this turbulent, investors usually make a flight to safety. Assets like the US dollar might get stronger for a bit, but gold often really takes off. Gold prices have a history of surging during times of intense geopolitical risk and economic uncertainty, especially when it's tied to Middle East conflicts and oil crises. We've already seen the recent escalations push gold prices to near record highs as investors look for a shield against inflation and currencies losing value. This isn't just a guess, it's a historical pattern. During the oil crises in the 1970s, gold went through the roof. The tensions we're seeing now are similar, and some analysts think gold's upward trend could speed up if the Middle East crisis gets worse, possibly hitting new highs. The global economy is clearly on edge, no doubt about it. Understanding what's driving all this is the first step to figuring out how to deal with the uncertainty. If this breakdown helped you make sense of things, do me a favor. Hit that like button, subscribe for more in-depth looks at geopolitics and your money, and share your thoughts in the comments below. What do you think individuals and governments should be doing to get ready for something like this? The idea of Iran's $100 oil bomb isn't just hype, it's a serious warning. This complex dance of diplomacy, conflict, and economies all tangled together is happening on a very high wire, and the Strait of Hormuz is a critical balancing pole. While many hope that things can be calmed down and that energy infrastructure won't be directly targeted, the chance of a miscalculation or someone deliberately causing a disruption remains dangerously high. A major interruption to oil flowing through there wouldn't just send ripples through the markets. It would create a tidal wave, potentially dragging the world into a severe economic downturn. Now more than ever, staying informed and understanding the huge risks tied to these geopolitical hotspots is absolutely vital. The stability we often just assume will be there, it's actually remarkably fragile.